The heavy steel door of the tactical briefing room slammed shut with a deep metallic boom, the kind that silences even the most hardened operators. Captain Serena Kovac stepped through, her left leg dragging just slightly behind her right. Every step looked deliberate, like each one carried a hidden cost. In her trembling left hand, she clutched a weathered logistics folder, edges frayed from too much use in too many places no one talked about. 12 Navy SEALs sat around the table. Conversation stopped mid-word. Eyes followed her uneven gait, some with curiosity, some with the kind of half-hidden disdain that comes when a room full of warriors sees someone who doesn't look like them. At the head of the table, Lieutenant Colonel Mason Calder leaned back in his chair. Broad-shouldered, every inch of him spoke of authority earned in blood and grit. A low, sharp chuckle left his lips, slicing the air in half. "Logistics," he said dryly. "They're sending us a crippled supply clerk for a combat briefing." His tone carried the quiet cruelty of someone who had spent his career measuring worth by physical dominance. A few men smirked. Others shifted uneasily, not ready to challenge him. Kovac reached for a chair. Her pen slipped from her grasp, landing against the polished concrete with a crisp, echoing clatter. She bent to pick it up, slow and awkward, her pain showing in every motion. When she straightened, her eyes landed on the tactical map spread across the table. For just 2 seconds, her expression changed. A flash of recognition, quick and sharp, before it vanished. "Your extraction route is compromised," she said softly. The words were barely louder than a whisper, but they froze the room as surely as a gunshot. Calder's chair scraped against the floor as he rose, his 6'3" frame casting a shadow over Kovac's modest 5'6". "And how?" he asked, the mockery gone now, replaced by a careful, dangerous curiosity. Would a supply clerk know that? It wasn't a challenge anymore. It was the start of something else, a predator realizing the prey might not be prey at all. Before I continue this story, let me ask you something. Have you ever misjudged someone entirely based on how they looked? Written them off, only to find out later they carried more courage, more skill, or more resolve than anyone else in the room? Tell me your story in the comments, and if moments like these, silent acts of unseen sacrifice, speak to you, please consider pressing the thanks button. It helps us keep telling these stories, and ensures these unsung heroes are never forgotten. Thank you for standing with us. The tension in the room thickened as Captain Serena Kovac straightened slowly, her deep brown eyes locking with Lieutenant Colonel Mason Calder's icy blue stare. She didn't answer his question. Instead, she stepped deliberately to the far corner of the room, positioning herself where she could see every man present, and keep her back against the wall. It was a move born of ingrained tactical awareness, not the habits of a supply clerk. From halfway down the table, Master Chief Victor Kane, the most senior enlisted SEAL in the unit, his 23 years of combat etched into every scar and weathered line on his face, caught something the others missed. Every 15 minutes, like clockwork, Kovac's eyes flicked to the 2:00 position. Outside the reinforced window, it wasn't random. It was a sniper's instinct, checking optimal firing positions without thinking. Kane didn't say a word, but his gut tightened. Whatever her personnel file claimed, this woman had seen more than her share of hostile ground. The briefing itself was supposed to be routine, a final planning session for the extraction of General Silas Whitaker from deep inside Syrian territory. The 62-year-old commander of special operations had been missing for 72 hours after his convoy was ambushed. Outside Aleppo, intel pointed to a fortified compound run by a particularly vicious militia, one known for both sophisticated tactics and a reputation for brutalizing captives. Kovac reached into her folder and pulled out a small, weather-beaten notebook. Its pages were yellowed, the edges soft from years of handling. As she flipped it open, several SEALs caught fleeting glimpses of strange symbols and notations written in an old Cyrillic code that predated modern Russian military encryption. She paused on one page, her finger tracing unseen lines, as though following a map only she could read. Staff Sergeant Logan Pierce, standing near the display, began his part of the briefing. "The compound has 3 entry points," he said, pointing to the satellite imagery projected on the wall-mounted screen. "Intel suggests minimal security on the eastern approach." Pierce was solid, 5 years with the teams. Methodical, level-headed under fire. But Kovac was already shaking her head. It was a subtle movement, barely there, but every man in the room was watching her now. Calder's jaw tightened. "What's your problem with the plan?" he demanded, his voice sharpening. This so-called supply clerk had been in the room less than 10 minutes and was already dismantling his carefully constructed operation. The mission launch clock was ticking. 18 hours left, and Lieutenant Colonel Mason Calder did not have the patience for whatever game this limping supply clerk was playing. But Captain Serena Kovac wasn't moving like someone unsure of herself. She stepped forward, each limp deliberate, until she stood beside the big satellite image on the wall. Her voice was calm, steady, and lethal. Kalashnikov emplacements, here, here, and here. Her finger stabbed 3 points into what everyone else saw as empty desert. The eastern approach looks clear, she continued, eyes sweeping the room, because they want it to look clear. It's a kill box, perfect overlapping fields of fire. The room broke into instant skepticism, murmurs, disbelief. Chief Warrant Officer Dalton Reeves, their intel specialist, tapped his tablet, pulling up ground-level drone imagery. He zoomed in on the exact spots she'd marked, and froze. The air shifted. She's right, Reeves said almost grudgingly. Thermal from last night shows heat signatures exactly where she called them. Every SEAL in the room turned back to her. How? Calder's voice was more steel than question. Kovac just returned to her corner, leaning against the wall like a sniper on Overwatch. The shadows are wrong, she said simply. When you've looked at enough recon, you know the difference between nature and men hiding in it. Her tone carried a weight, a history, that no logistics officer should have. The briefing rolled on, but the room was no longer the same. Every time Staff Sergeant Logan Pierce or another operator outlined a part of the plan, Kovac would quietly jot something in her battered notebook. No explanations, just that head shake, that pursed lip. And men who had survived the worst the world could throw at them began second-guessing themselves. Then came the audio intercept. Militia chatter played for threat assessment. Kovac froze mid-note. Her pen dug into her palm so hard her knuckles whitened. The mask cracked just for a second, and something dangerous slipped through. That's not a local accent, she said, her voice low but cutting. Commander's Chechen, former Spetsnaz, from the sound of his protocol. Soviet-era tactics, modern refinements. Lieutenant Chase Morgan, their linguist, replayed the clip. He'd pegged it as Syrian before, but now, hearing it again, the subtle markers were unmistakable. How many supply clerks break down enemy comms like that? He muttered. Kovac didn't answer. She didn't need to. Calder slammed his palm on the table, hard enough to make the coffee mugs jump. Enough games. Who are you, really? The room held its breath. Kovac's hand moved almost unconsciously to her left shoulder, tracing a scar hidden under the fabric. I'm exactly who my file says I am, she said, but her eyes told a different story. That 1,000-yard stare, the kind only carried by people who'd walked through hell and came back carrying its smoke in their lungs. Master Chief Victor Kane caught a detail no one else saw. The edge of an old medical bracelet under her sleeve. O-negative blood type. Universal donor. But the serial number? His stomach turned cold. That prefix hadn't been used since a classified op 3 years ago. One that ended in blood, fire, and names carved into the wall of the fallen. And then Kovac stood. No limp this time. No hesitation. Abort the mission, she said, locking eyes with Calder. This isn't a prisoner rescue. It's a trap. And it's built for you. Calder narrowed his eyes. Based on what evidence? Kovac didn't blink. Based on the fact that I've been in that compound, and I know exactly what's waiting for you inside. Silence. Then the clock kept ticking. He had long ago learned to tell the difference between analysis and experience. And Captain Serena Kovac wasn't guessing. She knew. Without a word, she reached into her weathered field notebook and pulled out a faded photograph, the kind you hold like it's a sacred relic. She slid it across the table so every man in the room could see. In it, a younger Serena stood in full combat gear beside a figure whose face was swallowed by tactical shadows. But it wasn't the man that made the SEALs lean in. It was the backdrop. The same compound they were about to assault. Seen through the lens of a sniper hide. Because I've been there before, she said, her voice low but cutting through the air like a knife. 3 years ago. Different mission. Same compound. And the man holding General Silas Whitaker? She stopped. Jaw locked. Something old and violent flickered in her eyes before she could speak again. The door slammed open. Colonel Barrett Harlow strode in, every step carrying the weight of decades making life or death calls. His eyes swept the room, reading the tension like a battlefield map. Then his gaze landed on Serena, and the color drained from his face. Phantom. The name wasn't shouted. It was breathed. But it carried to every corner of the war room. The SEALs froze. Phantom. The ghost sniper. The shadow in every special operations legend. Kill count? Classified. rumored to be in the high 40s. A ghost who could split a playing card with a bullet from 1,000 yards, and then vanished in Syria, presumed dead. Serena's mask finally cracked. With trembling fingers, she rolled up her right sleeve. The scar ran from wrist to elbow, the path of a bullet chewing its way down the bone. But it was the small tattoo beside it that made Master Chief Victor Kane exhale sharply, a phoenix rising from ashes, the number 47 woven into its wings, one number for every life taken in the service of her country, a weight she would carry forever. "I go by Kovac now," she said, voice steady despite the tears that threatened to surface. "Phantom died in Syria. At least that's what the reports say." Her eyes locked on Lieutenant Colonel Mason Calder, and for the first time since stepping into the room, she let him see her. Not the quiet supply officer they thought she was, but the warrior who had traded everything for a mission that still bled in her memory. The air in the room shifted. The mission wasn't the same anymore. The SEALs were no longer looking at a disabled logistics officer who had disrupted their briefing. They were looking at Captain Serena Kovac, a name whispered in the corridors of Fort Benning and Coronado, like a classified file that few had ever dared to open. But the question remained. Why was she here? And why now? Kovac stepped toward the tactical display with a sharp, deliberate motion. The limp that had marked her entrance seemed almost gone, as if she no longer needed to pretend. 3 years ago, Operation Blackwater. Her voice shifted into the cold precision of a debrief. General Silas Whitaker was deep in a diplomatic meeting with local tribal leaders. My spotter and I were in Overwatch, 800 meters out. She tapped the map, marking their position, each movement precise despite the faint tremor in her left hand. The meet was compromised. 40-plus hostiles closed in on the compound before we could extract the general. My spotter, Sergeant Ryder Cole, wanted to abort, call in air support. But that would take 30 minutes. Whitaker had maybe 5 before they breached. The room was dead silent. Every operator in the space went from Lieutenant Colonel Mason Calder to Master Chief Victor Kane was locked on her words. This wasn't just a story. This was the kind of mission that carved names into history. Kovac's finger traced the impossible terrain they had faced. "I made a choice," she said, her tone lowering. "I broke cover, moved to a secondary position that put me under direct enemy fire, but gave me eyes on their leadership." The first 3 shots dropped clean. Confusion rippled through the hostile ranks, buying seconds for Whitaker's security detail to start evacuation. Staff Sergeant Logan Pierce leaned forward, seeing the flaw instantly. But breaking cover meant they could triangulate your position. You became the primary target. Captain Serena Kovac gave the faintest nod, the kind that says this was never an accident. A ghost of a smile tugged at her lips. "That was the plan," she said evenly. "Draw their fire! Keep their eyes on me." While Sergeant Ryder Cole guided General Silas, Whitaker's team to the extraction point. Her gaze darkened. What I didn't expect was how damn good their counter-sniper was. Former Russian Spetsnaz, turned mercenary after the wall fell. Her left hand rose unconsciously, fingers brushing her shoulder through the fabric, touching the memory of old pain. "First round caught me here. Through and through. Spun me around. Didn't put me down. I returned fire, kept them pinned." Then her hand dropped to her thigh. "Second round hit here. Shattered the femur." She paused, her voice sharpening. "That's when things got interesting." Lieutenant Colonel Mason Calder leaned forward. "Interesting?" His earlier skepticism was gone. This was the kind of story that would be taught in special operations, schools for decades. I couldn't move, couldn't retreat, but I could still shoot, at least with my right hand. So I stayed. Every second they spent trying to kill me was a second they weren't chasing Whitaker. Her voice flattened, the tone soldiers use when speaking, about moments burned into their souls. Master Chief Victor Kane checked something on his tablet, the color draining from his face. "Mission report says your position took sustained fire for 6 hours. 63 confirmed hits. Artillery, RPGs, small arms. Nothing left but rubble. I couldn't move, couldn't retreat, but I could still shoot, at least with my right hand. So I stayed. Every second they spent trying to kill me was a second they weren't chasing Whitaker." Her voice flattened, the tone soldiers use when speaking, about moments burned into their souls. Master Chief Victor Kane checked something on his tablet, the color draining from his face. "Mission report says your position took sustained fire for 6 hours. 63 confirmed hits. Artillery, RPGs, small arms. Nothing left but rubble. 6 hours, 17 minutes, Serena corrected without hesitation. I counted every second. When you're bleeding out and can't move, time gets specific. Her eyes hardened. The trick was making them think I wasn't alone. Change position slightly. Vary rate of fire. Use Cole's rifle when mine overheated. Keep the illusion of a full sniper team so they'd commit everything to taking me out. But your spotter... Ryder Cole... Chief Warrant Officer Dalton Reeves began, then stopped. Her look was enough. Ryder stayed with me for 2 hours. I ordered him to leave, told him I was already dead, might as well make it count. He refused. Had to threaten to shoot him myself before he'd move. Her voice caught, barely. He made it 400 meters, before a mortar found him. I watched him die through my scope. And kept firing. No time to mourn. Not while Whitaker was still in danger. The room went still. Every operator there had lost brothers. But this was something else. This wasn't just bravery. This was calculated sacrifice, choosing to bleed out in rubble so others could live. And everyone in that room knew, there are soldiers who wear the uniform, and there are warriors who become the uniform. How did you survive? Chief Warrant Officer Dalton Reeves leaned forward. His years in covert intelligence making, him hunger for the truth behind the impossible. Captain Serena Kovac actually laughed, but it wasn't joy. It was a short, jagged sound, more like a blade scraping metal. I didn't, not really. Her eyes locked on Reeves. Every syllable carrying the weight of something no training prepares you for. When the firing stopped, when General Silas Whitaker's convoy finally punched through, I did the only thing I could. I played dead. Lay in my own blood for 6 hours while they swept the position. Ever tried not to scream when someone kicks? Your shattered leg just to check. If you're still breathing? Ever held your breath while they argue whether to put a confirmation round in your skull? The room fell into a silence so heavy it felt like the air itself had stopped moving. The distant hum of the ventilation was the only sound, and even that felt like it was intruding. Every operator there had faced combat. They'd seen men die. But this, lying broken, forcing your body to be a corpse, while predators search for survivors, was a nightmare that clawed at the edges of their imagination. Serena's voice dropped lower, but her tone was surgical. They left just before dawn. That's when the scavengers came. Locals looking for metal, weapons, bodies. One of them found me. Thought I was gone until I grabbed his wrist. I convinced him to drag me to a Red Cross post for the reward money. Her gaze turned to the floor for a moment, remembering the weeks that followed. 4 days of surgery just to keep me alive. 6 months before I could walk without screaming. Colonel Barrett Harlow stepped closer. His jaw tight, somewhere between admiration and anger. The report said you were KIA. I personally signed your posthumous Silver Star. Why wasn't I told you were still breathing? Serena's answer came without hesitation. Because Phantom needed to stay dead. The counter-sniper escaped. He knew my face, my tactics, everything. If the world knew I survived, he'd come for me. So I became Serena Kovac, just another logistics officer with a medical discharge, pushing paper in some forgotten office. Lieutenant Colonel Mason Calder studied the tactical map, his eyes narrowing as the pieces clicked together. This compound, same militia group. You think your counter-sniper is involved in General Whitaker's capture? Captain Serena Kovac didn't answer. Instead, she unlocked her phone, pulling up a section of intercepted comms. A calm professional voice filled the room, English laced with a foreign accent. The general is secure. Begin phase 2. Then tell our American friends. Phantom's ghost is welcome to try again. The words hit like a detonation. This wasn't a random snatch and grab. This was bait. A trap engineered to lure out the sniper who had humiliated them 3 years ago. They don't know you're alive, Master Chief Victor Kane said slowly. They're fishing, hoping the legend of Phantom forces someone into a rescue. Serena flexed her trembling left hand, the nerves permanently damaged from the old shoulder wound. Her limp was pronounced now. Except I'm not Phantom anymore. I can't hold a rifle steady with both hands. My leg barely gives me an hour before it locks. I'm exactly what I look like, a broken soldier counting inventory sheets. Staff Sergeant Logan Pierce glanced up from his tablet, cross-referencing building schematics with her notes. Ma'am, with respect, you've seen things our entire intel section missed. Broken or not, you know this target better than anyone. We need your eyes. 12 of America's finest were waiting on her call. The smart play? Sit in the talk, feed them intel, let them run it. But she saw it in their faces. They didn't truly understand the Sophistication of the trap they were walking into. "Gear up," Calder ordered. "We launch on schedule. Adjust per Captain Kovac's intel." He turned toward her. "Ma'am, we'd be honored if you ran tactical oversight from here." But Serena was already shaking her head. "Your approach is still wrong. You're thinking like Americans. Direct action, overwhelming force. This enemy thinks Soviet, layers of deception, endless patience." She walked to the weapons rack, her hand resting on a Macmillan TAC 338. Her voice was low, but it carried like a command. "Do you trust me?" The silence stretched. One by one, heads nodded, even Calder, who'd mocked her earlier. "Then we do this my way. And that means I go with you." The protests came hard and fast. Mobility issues, shooting limitations, liability in the field. Serena let them burn themselves out before raising a hand. "You're right. I can't run, can't fast rope, can't match your drills. And that's exactly why they won't see me coming. They're looking for Phantom, the perfect sniper. Not for a crippled logistics officer. Sometimes the best camouflage is weakness." The next 6 hours became a masterclass in misdirection. No frontal assault. No obvious playbook. The main team would draw attention, make it look like they were running standard doctrine. Meanwhile, Serena would slip in from an angle the enemy wouldn't guard, her disability becoming her cover. "I'll need a spotter," she said, scanning the gear. Even with her damaged grip, the Night Force attack reticle system compensated, feeding her zero-top precision. "I'm in," Lieutenant Chase Morgan volunteered without hesitation. The linguist had the patience and the nerve to run with her unorthodox methods. As they geared up, Serena's eyes caught Logan Pierce quietly stowing extra O-negative blood packs. "For Whitaker," he said, catching her look. "Same type as you, according to that bracelet." Serena touched the worn medical tag, her voice low. "I donated before every mission. Never knew when someone might need it. It was a small detail, but it spoke volumes about who Captain Serena Kovac had been before Syria broke her." The flight to the insertion point took 4 hours. She didn't waste a second, reviewing every contour of the compound, marking positions and angles in her notebook with surgical precision. The rest of the team, SEALs hardened by years of deployments, watched in silence. This wasn't the blunt force planning they were used to. This was chess, and Kovac was playing for checkmate. "Question," Chief Warrant Officer Dalton Reeves asked, leaning in. "How do you know which windows were reinforced since your last visit?" Serena didn't even look up. "Reflection patterns. Reinforced glass throws a different thermal signature. See here, stress points on the mounting frames. Heavy glass strains the structure differently." Finally, her eyes met theirs. "When you spend 6 hours staring at a building while bleeding out, you memorize every detail. At 0200 hours, they hit the staging area, overcast, no moon." Serena let the others help her into her gear without pride. The vest hanging, loose on a body stripped of operator muscle, but her eyes, sharp as ever. "Remember, this is theater," she told them. "Hit the Eastern approach hard. Make them believe you're running the standard American playbook. They'll commit resources to stopping you. That's what they've trained for." Lieutenant Colonel Mason Calder frowned. "And you?" "Morgan and I will be ghosts," Serena said, patting her rifle. "They're expecting Phantom, the perfect sniper. Instead, they'll get Serena Kovac, the broken supply clerk who can barely walk." A cold smile touched her lips. By the time they realize their mistake, it'll be too late. 12 shadows dissolved into the night. Serena and Lieutenant Chase Morgan moved on a route that valued invisibility over speed. Every step was a knife in her leg, but she let the pain sharpen her focus. This wasn't about her anymore, General Silas. Whitaker's life hung in the balance. The eastern wall erupted in explosions and gunfire right on schedule. Through her scope, Serena watched defenders rush to their pre-rehearsed positions. "Perfect, except fewer defenders than expected," Morgan murmured. "They're holding a reserve." Serena adjusted her aim, her left hand trembling. "Northeast tower. Third window. Shadow on the curtains, that's our counter-sniper. He's been waiting for me to show myself for 20 minutes. The main team's assault was pure misdirection. Serena was watching something else entirely, a shift in movement, a pattern hidden in the chaos. "They're moving Whitaker," she said flatly. "Southern exit. Vehicle on standby. This whole fight is just a delay." She recalculated wind drift in her head. "Jack, stand, skyline yourself for 2 seconds, then drop." No questions. Morgan didn't hesitate. He rose, perfect target, and dropped. A suppressed rifle crack answered instantly from the tower. "Got you," Serena whispered, squeezing her trigger. "One shot, one kill." The enemy rifle tumbled from the window. "Target down, move." They shifted position as fast as her leg allowed. Just as predicted, fighters were loading Whitaker into a vehicle at the southern gate. Then Serena froze. The general was walking. No restraints, but favoring his left side, the exact mirror of her own limp. "They tortured him," she murmured, voice going cold. "Left knee. Same injury they gave me." The engine roared to life. The clock was now running in seconds. 900 meters. Moving target. Crosswind, 15 knots, gusting to 20. And Captain Serena Kovac would have to make the shot with one functional hand. "Can't be done," Lieutenant Chase Morgan said quietly, reading her intent. "Not with your injuries." Serena smiled, the first genuine one all night. "You're right. Phantom couldn't make this shot. Not anymore. But I'm not Phantom." She slid into position, not resisting her damaged body, using it. The tremor in her left hand became part of her breathing rhythm. The agony in her leg kept her locked in the present. "Spotter's wind call," she ordered. "Left to right, 15 knots, gusting to 20, Morgan replied. She dialed adjustments by feel, muscle memory forged in blood and years. Through the scope, she found not General Silas Whitaker, but the driver. One shot to cripple the vehicle, without risking the general. She breathed. Slowed her heart. Found that perfect stillness between beats. The suppressed crack of her rifle carried like a whisper. 900 meters away, the windshield spiderwebbed. The driver slumped. The vehicle skidded into a concrete barrier. Confusion exploded. Fighters scattered, searching for an angle that didn't exist. "Driver down," Morgan confirmed. "Whitaker's moving, he's out." Serena was already tracking the next threat. 3 fighters rushing to recapture the general. 3 shots. 3 kills. Perfect. The main team under Lieutenant Colonel Mason Calder surged forward, smashing the disoriented defenses. Minutes later, Whitaker was secure, moving toward extraction. Serena and Morgan stayed in overwatch, surgical in their fire, each trigger pull preventing pursuit. Rotors cut the night air. The extraction birds were inbound. Serena exhaled. Mission accomplished. Then, contact rear! A lone fighter emerged from a concealed firing point, RPG shouldered, aimed at the lead helicopter. No time for calculations, no time for elegance. She fired from the hip. The recoil ripped through her damaged frame. The fighter dropped. The RPG clattered harmlessly to the dirt. Strong arms pulled her toward the bird as her leg gave way. Face to face with Whitaker, she saw recognition dawn despite the years and scars. "It's you," he breathed over the rotor thunder. "Negative, sir," Serena replied, voice formal. "Captain Serena Kovac, Logistics Corps." Whitaker studied her, hands trembling, leg ruined, eyes unbroken. Then slowly he rendered a perfect salute. One by one, every SEAL in the helicopter followed. "You gave everything for me?" he said, voice thick with something he rarely let anyone hear. Serena's tired smile cut through the noise. "I'd let them shoot me again, sir. That's what we do, we take the bullets so the mission gets home." As the compound shrank below, Serena let the shaking take her. She wasn't Phantom anymore. Would never be that untouchable legend again. But tonight proved something more dangerous than perfection. That the most broken soldier in the room might be the one who saves them all. The after-action report would say, all objectives achieved. 0 friendly casualties. It wouldn't mention the logistics captain who walked back into the shadows. It wouldn't say how 12 elite operators learned to nod in quiet respect whenever they passed her in Fort Bragg's corridors. They knew her secret. And they knew one more thing. You don't need 2 good legs to be the deadliest weapon on the field. The heavy metal door of the tactical briefing room slammed shut with a force that made every head turn. Captain Serena Kovac stepped inside, her left leg dragging ever so slightly, each movement a quiet battle against pain. In her trembling hand, she clutched a weathered logistics folder, the kind of thing nobody in that room thought could change their mission. 12 Navy SEALs sat around the tactical table, their eyes following her uneven steps. Lieutenant Colonel Mason Calder, a man whose name carried weight from years of flawless operations, let out a short, mocking laugh. "Logistics? They're sending us a crippled supply clerk for a combat briefing?" His words hung in the air like a knife, sharp, dismissive, and meant to wound. A few operators smirked. Others looked away, uneasy but silent. Serena's pen slipped from her shaking fingers, clattering against the cold concrete floor. She bent to retrieve it, the movement awkward, her jaw tightening against the pain. Her eyes rose, scanning the tactical map spread before them. In the space of 2 seconds, something shifted in her gaze. A spark of recognition, so quick you could almost miss it. "Your extraction route is compromised," she said softly. The words were quiet, but carried a weight that made the entire room freeze. Calder's chair scraped the floor as he stood, his 603 frame looming over Serena's 5'6". How would a supply clerk know that? His tone was no longer mocking, it had turned dangerous. The kind of dangerous that happens when a predator realizes the prey might not be prey at all. She remembered later, sitting alone in the dim light of her quarters, the pain throbbing deep in her bones, a pain no medication could erase. Her hands still shook too much to sign even the simplest requisition form. She would close her eyes and drift back to that day in the helicopter. The thrum of the rotors, the smell of cordite mixed with aviation fuel, and the faces of 12 battle-hardened warriors, raising their hands in perfect unison. That salute. It wasn't for Phantom, the legendary sniper with 47 confirmed kills. It was for Captain Serena Kovac, the broken logistics officer who had stared death in the eye one last time and stepped forward anyway. Because sometimes the greatest acts of heroism are quiet. They don't make headlines. They don't get medals. But they save lives. Before I go on, have you ever misjudged someone based on how they looked, only to realize you were standing in front of someone extraordinary? Tell me your story in the comments. And if stories of silent sacrifice move you, hit that thanks button. Not for me, but for the ones who never asked to be called heroes, yet became them anyway.